It was at one of the Vancouver festivals that we first met the guys from Silly Wizard. They were a great band. They played a wild and elegant brand of Scottish music. Ballads, original songs, and great reels and jigs, all at a terrifying and impossible speed. The two brothers, Phil Cunningham and Johnny, on accordion and fiddle, were telepathic. They had that sure and unerring sense of where the other was going to go that only siblings have, and they were hugely popular right from their very first tour. They were also funny and friendly, and holy shit did they ever drink. Most of us out on the circuit in those days could really put it away, and some, like myself, were capable of heroic and stupid and beastly abuse, but this was the first time we had encountered true immortals. They and the Tannehill Weavers, another extraordinary Scottish band who were made even more dangerous with the inclusion of a piper, could put unbelievable quantities of booze away with little discernible effect, except that their accents got more pronounced as the evening wore on. In my night's end, one longed for subtitles. They could only understand each other, and then with some difficulty, misunderstandings inevitably broke out, and we were helpless to intervene, having no idea what they were saying. Fights ensued, furniture got broken, and they had to be separated. Luckily, the Tannehills were small and could be mostly managed. Still, there were times when the appearance of a Scottish band on the festival bill was like seeing a distant Viking sail on the horizon. You take in the laundry and hide the cattle. No point in hiding the women, they were already out in the front yard waving their panties. Stan and I were watching Johnny and Phil one night playing an after-hours session at the festival volunteer party. They had gotten a huge supply of beer and had been working their way through it pretty steadily, and they were now both surrounded by a ring of their slain. The booze was having no effect save to make them play ever faster with more impossible embellishments and long passages of 128th note flurries, triplets played in perfect unison with jaw-dropping. Presently Phil stopped and put down his accordion. "I have to piss." He tried to get up. His legs wouldn't answer. "What the?" He tried again and fell back. "My fucking legs won't work." He sat there looking confused. Stan and I decided to help. We picked him up by the armpits and got him to his feet. "There you go." "I can't walk." Phil was looking down at his treacherous extremities. "Bloody hell." So we dragged him out of the room and down the hall, his feet trailing behind, and got him into the bog. We propped him up in front of a urinal and Stan said, "You're on your own, mate. I'm not holding it for you." Phil pitched forward and managed to hold himself out from the wall by his forehead. There was some fumbling with his garments, and we politely averted our gaze, and he gave forth, "Ah, that's great." And we waited. And we waited. We waited some more. Stan lit and smoked most of a cigarette. Finally, Phil was done, and he restored his state of dress, and we dragged him over to the sink so he could rinse his hands, and then we dragged him back down the hall to the party room. His legs were still lifeless, not even part of him. We placed him back in his chair, gave him back his accordion. He went right back into another impossible and blindingly fast tune. Stan turned to me and he shook his head. "I think we have a new winner." Next morning, we all reconvened, somewhat worse for wear, at a workshop stage. It was 11 a.m. It was a bad hour for the balking wounded to be up and about. Stan and our bass player, Dave Eady, and I were doing a workshop with Betsy Rose and Kathy Winter, two leading lights of what was called in those days women's music. We were joined by the tattered remnants of Silly Wizard. We, the men, were all suffering from self-inflicted sucking head wounds, and were trying to ease the situation with brandy. We were all feeling pretty seedy, and our mood was not helped one bit by the realization that our presence at the workshop was clearly surplus to needs. The audience was overwhelmingly there to see Betsy and Kathy, who, while friendly enough, were obviously repelled by the sight of a gaggle of hungover, unshaved degenerates, smoking, coughing up phlegm, and passing large bottles of Courvoisier to and fro in clear view of young children. Betsy and Kathy were up first, and they launched into what could only be described as a rant against the music world, how it was controlled by men who wouldn't give women a fair shake, how women's music was strong, women's voices would be heard, women would take control of their own music, their own lives, their own destiny, and the chauvinistic bastards who were holding women down would in the end be beaten, and the world would be a better place for it. It was like a revival meeting. The audience was eating it up, and with each declaration, more and more of them were standing up and cheering and chanting, "Sisterhood! Sisterhood!" It was then that Betsy and Kathy launched into their song, and it was about how the music business was controlled by men who wouldn't give women a fair shake, how women's music was strong, and so on. We had no argument whatsoever with the general thesis. We agreed completely. We knew the business was controlled by swine, Our mother, who ran our record company, could give you chapter and verse about how foul and dishonest men were. We were on their side, but at that moment we all looked like Exhibit A as to just how tedious our brief and faltering journey down from the trees had been. So we simply hung our heads and waited and tried to make ourselves smaller. The song finally finished and was followed by a storm of applause. Close to 1,000 women were standing and clapping and whistling and chanting for some time. It looked as if we might actually get away without having to play and expose ourselves to cruel public scrutiny. After a while, though, it did begin to die down, and Stan looked at me and Dave, and we began to adjust our mics in order to play. The last few cheers and chants were just starting to fade when Johnny Cunningham leaned over to me, and not realizing that my microphone was hot, very hot as it turned out, said in a very loud and hoarse stage whisper, "Well, doesn't that just make you want to cut your cock off?"